There's always life after anything that you're going through. I had become a single mother with 2 children, and I said, I have to do this. And I said, I'm going to LA for 2 weeks and I'm coming back with a record deal. It's a vile industry, and so I hated the industry, but I loved the art. I started hearing spirits speak to me like, what are you doing? What images, what is this you putting out? So then it became, I don't even want to do music at all anymore. So I was also in a relationship which became a marriage that was very volatile, and that had a lot of issues and problems. My mouth was like a sailor, like I could cuss you out better than anybody you ever heard. I became, and I've seen and experienced in a lot of people that I was around, very spiritually arrogant. I started seeking knowledge for myself and not just what I was told from the pulpit. I'm Soleil, and this is my journey.
I know there's been a lot of speculation about my retirement and what I plan on doing next. And you know, throughout my life, I faced many obstacles. The road has not always been clear. During those tough times, I felt alone. But I prayed and I asked God for strength. In my turmoil, God reached out to me and it revealed whatever I was going through was a part of my true destiny. It was at that moment I made a decision to stop getting in the way of God's plans, because my true story of my destination was my journey.
Soleil is an American rapper known for her appearance on the 1999 hit single Who Dat, and for releasing her solo debut album entitled Skin Deep. But while facing the difficulties within the music industry and her personal life, Soleil decided to walk away and start a new journey for herself that would later provide the answers that would define both self and purpose.
There's always life after anything that you're going through, and that every circumstance is a teacher if you allow it to be. So if we stay and wallow in why me and why this, and instead of focusing on what's now and how am I bettering myself now. I teach my students, you're either depressed living in the past or anxious living in the future, and most often we miss now and being present. And when we do that, we end up missing our whole lives, because we're either always in the past, mad, unforgiving. Forgiveness is one of the greatest things you can do for healing, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Understanding that people only do the best that they can at any given moment. And that's a hard concept for people to believe, because we like to look at people and say, no, you could have did better. No, you didn't have to do that. No. But if that person was capable in that moment, whether something mentally kept them from acting correctly, spiritually, physically, emotionally, something in your character at any given moment may prevent you from doing the best that you have the ability to do. But if you were capable of doing it at that moment, you would. And so when we look at people and honestly say and realize that they're only capable of doing what they can at any given moment, it allows you to have more compassion for people, to have more empathy for people, and to look at people that they are only human. I grew up in Kansas City, and so whenever I say that, people are like, for real? What you do in Kansas City? I'm like, it was in the hood in Kansas City. That's where I grew up. But I grew up with 2 brothers. I have 2 sisters also, but they're much younger than me, so I'm about 14 years older than them. So I was more like their mama than a sister. But I grew up the middle girl of 2 boys, and was into hip hop and running the streets, throwing rocks with the other kids in the neighborhood and playing outside. And but I also grew up in church, so my mother was a gospel singer, and very much a staple in the Black community in Kansas City there locally. So I had a good childhood. Some people, I hear stories and I'm like, wow, I was blessed in the sense that I had a mother and father, and even when my parents divorced, I always had a present father. So I think that alone helped shape in not only how I view the world and how I operated in my life, but who I grew into as a woman and how I related to men and other people. But yes, I had an amazing mother. I couldn't have asked for a better mother, and I had, and still have, my father is still here. My mother passed a few years ago, and my father was always a present father. So even when they divorced, he was there, financially, physically, emotionally, whatever I needed, and still is. So sometimes I call him like, Daddy, I need, he's gonna do it. So yeah, I had a good childhood.
At a young age, Soleil was confused about the traditions of a Baptist church.
As a child, I'll be scared sometime in church, like, what they doing? They falling out. They, you know what I mean? Or either we laughing about it, or the pastor's hollering and screaming, and we can't even understand what he's saying. So that was the childhood. So the learning that I got would be scriptures that my mother had on the wall, or having her pray with us, and her teachings more so, I would honestly say, than being in the church. I learned community being in the church as a child, and family, that type of bond, because everyone was tight and close and looked out for each other. So those type of things I learned and saw that were modeled for me.
Very early did Soleil realize that she had a gift to perform.
I was in plays when I was in kindergarten, doing plays and performing. I was in theater. I performed and did the Mikado and Oliver and all these kind of theatrical productions. I thought I was Diana Ross. It was like entertain. I knew I wanted to be an entertainer, though I had other interests. And the school I was in was a college prep academy. See, I went to school during a time where the schools were just being desegregated. So you had to score in the 90th percentile in order to be bussed out to the good schools. And so I scored in the 90th percentile standardized test, got bussed out to some different schools, and though I was in these gifted and talented, as they called them, programs then, I spent a lot of time performing and writing. I wrote poetry, I wrote music, I memorized in every rap song that I could that was kind of, hip-hop was new at that time in the 70s, and so I was memorizing Rapper's Delight when I was like 6 years old. So I knew I wanted to entertain, and I did that. We performed in every talent show that came through Kansas City. We opened up for every major act that came through, me and my best friend. The only reason I was in a group was because I was shy off stage. I would get on stage and perform, but I was pretty shy. And so my best friend, who we would do some things together, and she could sing a little bit and she could rap, and we wrote together, and we wrote books and made our own little magazine, and we're writers. I was like, let's do this group. So that's how the group came about. But that lasted through high school, and then after that we both went off to college and did different things, and I circled back around to music because I knew I would never be content without fulfilling that part of that gift that was put on the inside of me and letting that manifest in whatever way it did. I just knew I wouldn't be satisfied. So I circled back around to music in the mid-90s. Started recording with some people locally. Tech Nine is from Kansas City. He's like the highest paid independent artist, hip hop artist ever. But we grew up together. Tech will tell you, he does interviews now. He's like, Soleil took me on my first plane ride. We took him to BRE convention. I drug him around everywhere like he's dope. Y'all got to hear him. And so we worked together. We did songs together. And I had stopped for a while, but circled back around to music, just knowing that that was something that I had to do at some point. So I went to LA. I had 2 children at the time. I had become a single mother with 2 children. And I said, I have to do this. And I said, I'm going to LA for 2 weeks and I'm coming back with a record deal. And I told my mother, I need to keep the kids and I'm coming back with a record deal. And I went to LA and I came back almost with a record deal. I came back with the promise, come to Atlanta. And I got you. I met Tricky, who produced. I met Tab, who would manage me, who introduced me to Tricky, and they were like, come to Atlanta. They happened to be at a album release party that I was at in LA, and they were like, come to Atlanta. I ended up in Atlanta. I came back, got my children, came to Atlanta, ended up on Who Dat, which was the #1 on the rap charts for like 8 weeks, and at the time our hip hop song had never stayed on the charts. That was the longest that it had been. A song had been on the rap singles charts. It was on there for 8 weeks at #1, and I ended up getting a publishing deal based off of that because I wrote my part, and then I ended up with a record deal on DreamWorks right after that.
Signing her new record deal, Soleil was finally able to explore outside the Kansas City borders.
it was like I made it. Everybody was, everybody wanted to get out of Kansas City. Like, they done here, and if you're in music, it wasn't much that you could do. Now it's, independently, you can do pretty much anything anywhere, but at that time you had to get out of your city and get to New York or LA, or then Atlanta was booming. And it was like, finally, like, I did it. But I was always the person that I knew if I said I was going to do something, I did it. I knew I was going to make that happen. So it was just like, yeah, I did it. Like, I made it.
Part of signing her deal, Soleil made sure her daughters were with her every step of the way.
My two older daughters were always my priority. So they'll tell you some stories. The record label had called me before, like, yeah, you got to be in such and such a place and I had just come back from somewhere else, and we got a picture, and I was like, you find my kids there too? Because I just got back home. So unless they going, I ain't getting on the plane. So they booked them kids a ticket and bring with me. Like, it's been, you see, everybody that was on the road with me would be like, oh yeah, we helped raise them babies, because from video shoots in the trailer to flying them to LA and dragging them around with me, they came around the road, because they were my priority, period. It was if I had to choose even at that time, it would have been like, okay, well, I can't do this right now. So I had, again, a good support system. I had one of my cousins came and lived with me. I brought her to Atlanta with me when I moved here, and she lived with me. So if I was in the studio, the children were with her. Sometimes they'd be in the studio in the lounge, playing, reading, doing whatever, and then we leave. But I always made sure to book my sessions during the day. A lot of time they would be at school. Somebody would pick them up for me if I couldn't, but I just made it work. I made it work. But I still felt like, because I'm so, this motherly instinct that I have is always just had a strong hold to me. I've always been very dedicated as a mother. So if it never was too much to balance, because I just always made sure that I made provision that they're here with me and I spend as much time as possible.
Soleil's first album became a success, but she was not satisfied by the image the industry portrayed her to be.
Sometime in '99, I met my now ex-husband, and I had wrapped up that first album, recorded a second album, but I was disenchanted with the industry. See, I was the artist that was on the road. I love to perform. I love the creative aspect. I love to write. I love to create, all of those things, but I don't like the business. So I hated the business. I didn't go to the club unless I got paid, because I had to walk through for something. Don't smoke, don't drink. Like, super nerdy. I'd be out. People wouldn't think that, because you see the album and the images that I put out there and the songs, and my mouth was like a sailor. Like, I could cuss you out better than anybody you ever heard, because of how I grew up. But I was the artist on stage, and I went back to my room and was reading a book, or taking a nap, or with my children. It's never even before music, I wasn't a club type hangout person. I just didn't. I preferred to, I was really nerdy. I was taking classes, I was in school, I was doing something, starting a business. It just never interested me. So the industry overall, the corruption of the industry, it's a vile industry. And so I hated the industry, but I loved the art. But I feel like the urban department of DreamWorks, they were new, and I felt like they didn't know what they were doing with hip hop. And, I was on there, Dave Hollister, Tamar was on there. Who else was on there? A few other artists, but they were new. And I just felt like, though the album did well, I was like, y'all don't know what to do with me. And then I was just, back then, I didn't care. I was like, you gonna do what I want to do and how I want to do, or I ain't doing it. Like, I'm cool. I made some money. The ability to make $1 ain't never eluded me. I'll go do it somewhere else, but I want to do it how I want to do it, because I felt like I didn't really get the opportunity on the first album to, they wanted to create something other than how I wanted to present myself, and you have but so much power. At that time, especially when you're signed to a major label, you only have but so much control over what's put out there. So I was like, you know what? I finished that second album. Then I got pregnant with Story, my third daughter. And I was like, I don't think I want to put this record out, because I feel like I'm wasting my time and y'all not going to promote it like it needs to be promoted. I was feeling like I wanted to be home more. I was like, I'm about to have a newborn. I just don't. And so, Kasim Reed, who's the mayor of Atlanta, he wasn't the mayor then, he had negotiated my record deal. He also negotiated me out of that record deal. I appreciate him for that without owing any money. And I decided I was going to take some time off, and then that I would try to get another deal with a label that I felt like really got me and what I wanted to do, and wasn't trying to, because I felt like they were trying to create me, they were wanting to mold me into this kind of pop artist that I didn't want to be, but it was like a vulgar pop artist. Like, it just didn't make sense to me. And I was like, this is not the vision I had. Like, this is not what I envisioned for myself. So I took that time off. And once I was off and taking care of my now 3 daughters, I started hearing Spirit speak to me like, what are you doing? What images? What is this you putting out? What kind of example do you want to be? And so that started. So then it became, I don't even want to do music at all anymore. I just felt when I do something, I do it all the way, 110%. And so when I started feeling promptings from Spirit, I said, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm listening. So now I was always a reader. I was always a studier, always immersed in learning more and bettering myself in some way. So I started asking questions, and I met who's one of my best friends now, my closest friends. Her name is Monet, and she was introduced to me by a mutual friend we have who used to be one of my dancers on the road. And when I moved to DC, she introduced us, and she's like, oh, I think y'all really like each other. And she was really deep into the church. And so I started asking her questions, like, what about this? Because she was really knowledgeable about the Bible. And I grew up in church, but like I said, I ain't learned nothing. I didn't learn much, except, again, what already was in me, because I was the child that I had a really strong intuition. I was a child that I had a relationship with God outside of religion, outside of being in church. I spoke to God and prayed and heard God speak to me, from inside of me when I was a child. So I didn't have, I wasn't studied and learned in religion, but I had a relationship as a child. So I started asking her questions because I saw her living this life that what we're told is supposed to be a Christian life, and living what looked like that, that I hadn't seen before on a level I hadn't seen. So I started asking her a lot of questions, and then I started going to church with her.
Soleil was beginning to find solace as she studied the teachings of religion, but she would later realize her surroundings would disrupt that feeling of comfort.
It helped me to become more disciplined. It helped me to become more studied. It helped show me who I am, who I want to be, and who I don't want to be. And I was in a church was a teaching church, and a very well studied and learned pastor. And I had never experienced that before. I experienced at times a lot of the hoopla we see in our black churches that I love. I grew up around that, but I didn't grow up with a lot of teaching. So this was a different experience to me, like, oh, we actually got real classes. Oh, we really studying. Oh, we really doing exegesis, like going deep. So I'm taking classes, I'm learning exegetical study and all of this. So I learned I learned a lot at that time, but I did also learn still a lot of things that I didn't want to be. I became, and I've seen and experienced in a lot of people that I was around, very spiritually arrogant. And I know more than you. And my way is the only way. And that ended up not settling right in my spirit. And some of my friends that were in the same, felt the same way, that like we're growing in ways and getting some benefit in a lot of ways, but we are the worst too, because we are sitting high and looking low. Like, I didn't like that. And I couldn't live in that space. And as I started to grow more, I became more and more disenchanted then. So was it a refuge at the time? Absolutely. Did it offer solace at times that I needed it? Absolutely. But again, it also showed me a lot of things that I didn't want to do and who I didn't want to be. My mother, as deep as she was in the church and as spiritual as she was, she still never subscribed to some of the teachings that we hear in the church, that certain things are evil. Astrology is evil. Some of our ancestors' practices are evil. These things that our ancestors taught and lived and practiced spiritually are evil, and you shouldn't. She never subscribed to that, so I still had that freedom of exploring and learning for myself. But when that 7 years that I was deep into, I would call it, for lack of a better term, right-wing Christianity, far right, that things still never set right with my spirit. So I never could reconcile that this is the only way and everybody else is going to hell. You can't tell me that. You can't tell me that about something that's a few thousand years old, couple thousand years old, all these people. So it was things that I said, And I sat in church one day and heard the pastor saying, Buddha couldn't do this, and Muhammad couldn't do this, and such can't do this. And it was just like, I was like in my chair, just like wanting to, like I wanted to run out. And my spirit was screaming out like, this is spiritual arrogance at its highest. This is not love. And so I had a conversation with my best friend one time, and I said, and I was still in church at the time, and I said, okay, so we're seeking and saving the lost, right? She said, yeah. I said, okay, I'm just asking, because this is me, because I'm searching and going on a whole nother journey now. I said, so you believe that, let's take this upstanding, moral Muslim man that's lived his life, basically that looks like what a good Christian, how they would live their lives, honor their wife, take care of their children, upstanding in their neighborhood, working in their community, living at what we would deem a moral life. And then you got somebody on the street that raped somebody, killed somebody, lived their whole life in a disgusting manner, ends up in jail, and then finds the Lord. And now he's going to go to heaven, if there is a place, and live there for the rest of his life. But this man is going to die and burn in eternal hell because of what he was taught, because of how he was raised, what was indoctrinated into him. But he's lived the life that looks like this Christian. I said, I don't. I started studying the roots of Christianity. I started studying Christianity from a historical standpoint, not a devotional standpoint. I started seeking knowledge for myself and not just what I was told from the pulpit. I started doing a lot of research, self-reflection, and spending a lot of time in prayer, but not just in prayer and meditation, where I'm not talking to God and asking God anything, but I'm sitting quietly and listening. And it was, needless to say, it brought about a whole entire change in my views and my knowing. And I feel like I moved from a space of belief into a space of knowing. And I don't share it often, except, I teach yoga and meditation. But I don't, because I don't feel any desire to sway people. I feel like I don't curse the bridge that brought me over. I feel like religion has its place, and it's necessary for some people in certain instances. People need structure. I could no longer live inside the box and confines of what we say Christianity is. Especially after looking at the roots, especially after learning and studying deeply with scholars and historians and finding these roots. And then I could no longer live with myself saying, I'm going to curse what my ancestors saw and practice. Everything is the devil. Everything is evil. Everybody else and everything in the world is evil. I can't live with that. It never sat right with me. And so I don't share and had a conversation too often, because I never want people to think that I am discrediting what their belief or their religion or their path. I feel peace within my spirit, understanding and knowing that I'm not judging anyone for the path they take, for the box that they choose to operate in to worship their God, their vision, their idea of God. And I think that most of us, especially in the West, have a very skewed vision and idea of what other religions are. We think that a lot of religions that are polytheistic are, and they aren't. Our African ancestors weren't polytheistic. These netchers, and even in Hinduism, these deities that we see, and they're polytheistic and they worship all these thousands of deities. No. These are just different aspects and names that they've ascribed to different attributes of a one living God, goddess, because I don't call God he either anymore. I mean, how can we have a male man God that we picture sitting up high on these clouds? And so I think especially in the West, because Christianity was beaten into our ancestors and out of fear and was used as a tool for control, that we just don't question. It is what it is. We don't look any deeper and look at what is really is Christ consciousness, and then what is this religious box that we've confined ourselves to. And I've just chosen to not confine myself to that box anymore.
After embracing her new path, Soleil has started working on a new album.
So this new project is just the evolution of a woman, and I don't have anything to prove. This is a project I looked and said, I can't let that one piece of art be the only musical representation that I leave when it doesn't represent who I am now. And for my children and grandchildren, when I have them, and great-grandchildren come back and be like, oh, that was my grandma. Your grandma was off the chain. And then they not see, oh no, my grandma took a leap from this to that. I wanted them to be able to see that evolution, and because I understand also the impact of words and music and how it really does truly impact people. So I couldn't, as much as before, I never wanted to do music again, but God said otherwise. But so this project will be a project that just represents who I am now on every level. I would give someone that's searching the advice to have no fear. Fear is binding, and it keeps you stuck. And just moving through the world without fear, understanding that we are a piece of God, Goddess, God's self. Like I said, I teach yoga, and that yoga is the journey of the self, through the self, to the self, back to the self, understanding and knowing that we're all divine. The divine in me honors and recognizes the divine in you. Understand your divinity, and you don't have to keep that confined to a box that you can neatly label and to conform.
On the next, The Journey with LaMarr Woodley.
Started to really pray a little bit more, because I got away from that. You know what I mean? And just really trying to find myself and try to have that relationship with God and, see if he can help me. My foundation and who I am, that's gonna always be something that's gonna overcome and prevail any situation.